This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as financial advice. All views expressed on this podcast are solely the opinions of the host and/or any guests that we might have from time to time. Nothing on this podcast should be construed as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or to follow a particular investing strategy.
Hello, you sexy sat stackers, and welcome to the latest edition of the Bitcoin Bulletin Podcast. I am Chris, and today is Wednesday, March 1st, 2023, and that means, of course, that it is DCA Wednesday. And before we get that stack on, a real quick look at the vital statistics. At the time of this recording, we are sitting at a Bitcoin blockchain block height of 778,886. And Bitcoin is ringing in at a US dollar price of 23,545 US dollars per Bitcoin, or 4,347 sats per cuckbuck. And that is down just a tiny bit from the last 2 weeks when we were just a little higher than 24,000. I had mentioned, we mentioned last episode in when we spoke about Bitcoin magic numbers and investor psychology, that 23,000 was an awful lot like last bear market's 9,000, except for without the Vegeta memes, right? If you were around last cycle, you know, we hit 9,000 a lot on the way up and on the way down, and the Vegeta memes with it's over 9,000 were flying quite frequently. There is no 23,000 Vegeta meme, but it just feels very similar other than the meme. 23,000, that is. It's deja vu all over again. All right. And speaking of blocks, we are currently 61,114 blocks until the next halving, the official kickoff of the next halving cycle. And that is still looking like that's going to be on or about April 22nd of 2024. So just a little over a year away now, and coming up faster than you know it. 2 weeks ago, it was looking like that was going to be April 24th. Of course, that's based on block time, not human time. So depending on how fast those blocks are coming in, obviously it got a little sooner, bumped up a couple days to April 22nd. But depending on which estimators you look at and how fast the blocks are averaging, that could be anywhere between next March and next June. So anywhere either a year from now or a year and a few months from now, but getting close. As they say, coming at you like a big dog with a wet nose. There's nothing you can do about it. TikTok, next block. That halving is coming, and it's coming fast. Before it gets here, though, we're going to take advantage and stack as many cheap Satoshis as possible, because if history repeats itself, or at least rhymes, we always set a new all-time high within 6 months to a year or so of the halving. We eclipse the previous all-time high, and then sometime in a 6 month to 18-month time frame, that's when you get the highest, the new peak all-time high. But there are many new all-time highs along the way before we begin the next crypto winter, so to speak, the next Bitcoin bear market. For those of you following this statistic, the Bitcoin market capitalization is coming in at $454.4 billion, down about $12 billion from last week, because of course we're a couple $100 less expensive than Bitcoin was last week. And for those of you who value your wealth in shiny metal rocks, shiny yellow rocks, it will currently cost you 12.9 ounces of gold to purchase just one Bitcoin. Roughly the same as last week, down a little bit. Of course, that's because the US dollar price of Bitcoin is down, and the price of gold is still hanging in there. I think it was around the $18,000 range per ounce. Although I haven't looked at it recently because I don't care about gold. I heard gold referred to, often you hear of Bitcoin referred to as, digital gold. And I heard gold referred to as analog Bitcoin the other day, and I like that. So we're going to stick with our electronic Bitcoin, but if you do value your wealth in analog Bitcoin, it's going to cost you 12.9 ounces of the stuff for just one Bitcoin. And that is still really cheap compared to where it will be if Bitcoin goes on to hit a new all-time high after the next halving cycle. If Bitcoin history repeats or rhymes, it's going to be pounds of gold to purchase just one Bitcoin. And for those of you who value your wealth in pizza, one Bitcoin will currently purchase you 1,394 Papa John's pizzas. That's one large pepperoni pizza from Papa John's for 1,394 days. That is almost 4 years, 3.9 years worth of one pizza a day. And that is a heck of a lot of pizza. That's a lot of food security for just one Bitcoin. All right, real quick. There's a distinct possibility that next week's DCA Wednesday episode will either be late or pre-recorded. I haven't quite sorted that out yet. I'm going to be pulling a plan B, and I'm going to be offshore next Wednesday, and I'll probably be too far offshore to have data. So I will do our stack. In fact, I'm going to get to that in a little bit on this episode. But rest assured, even if there is no Bitcoin Bulletin podcast episode, bright and squeaky early, we're never early, right? But if there's no episode next Wednesday, rest assured I did do my stack. I was just out of range of data, and I'll get the episode posted as soon as I can get connected. Real quick, thank you to those of you listening on your favorite podcasting 2.0 apps, such as Fountain app. We don't have any boost to read this week again, but some of you are streaming sats. The sats, I could see the sats streaming in, and that's cool. So thank you for those of you who were streaming a sats. And even if you're not streaming a sats, you should still listen on Fountain app because you can get paid sats to listen to your favorite podcasts. So even if you don't want to support your favorite podcaster by streaming sats or boosting sats, you get some free sats. It's kind of like the modern equivalent of a fountain, hence the name Fountain. You know, back in the early days, pre-me, there were Bitcoin fountains where there were faucets. I said fountain. I guess that would be faucet app. Got a bit ahead of my brain got a bit ahead of my tongue, or vice versa. But there were faucets, and they would give you Bitcoin just for going to a website. I think one of them would give you like 5 Bitcoin just for clicking on the link. Can you imagine? $100,000 just for going to a website. And maybe that's what, Fountain will be like. If you earn, 100 sats listening to podcasts, one day maybe we'll hit dollar Bitcoin or dollar sat parity, and that'd be $100. Even if we don't, even if Bitcoin hits dollar sat parity, you get paid $1 or $2 just for listening to your favorite podcast. So, and you're going to listen to these podcasts anyway, so you might as well get paid. All right. So those of you listening to the podcast the demographics are they're exactly the same as they were last week. 52% of you are listening from the United States. 14% of you are listening from Argentina. 5% of you are listening in Germany. 3% of you are listening in Luxembourg. And once again, we have a 4-way tie for 5th place with Canada, Spain, Venezuela, and Colombia, each with 2% of you listening from those countries. So thank you very much. It's really cool to see people all over the world listening to the Bitcoin Bulletin podcast, and hopefully your orange pilling friends around the world. All right. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Texas Slim. If you're familiar with Texas Slim on Twitter, I think he's at Modern T-Man, but he's involved in the Texas Beef Initiative and starting the beef initiatives around the country where you meet your local rancher, the whole shake your rancher's hand thing. And I don't have a local rancher here where I'm at because there aren't a lot of ranchers in Florida. There's a lot of cattle here, and they all end up starting their life here and then getting shipped off out west to end their lives. So if somebody knows of a local rancher that you can get cuts of beef from on the east central Florida, the east coast, central east coast of Florida, the space coast of Florida, give me a shout out and let me know. But anyway, back to the story. Listening to Texas Slim and the other members of the Texas Beef Initiative talking about the different cuts of meat you don't normally see, you don't normally get. I was at the butcher the other day and I saw a picanha sitting there next to the briskets. And I was like, holy crap, I don't think I've ever seen a picanha before. I'm going to have to snag that. So I did. And I know there's lots of different ways to cook a picanha, but I guess one of the traditional ways to do so in South America is to smoke it. Of course, picanha is a traditional South American cut of beef. And I guess it's named after the slang for the cattle prods, basically the sticks, the pokes, the cow pokes that the cowboys in Brazil or Argentina would use to herd the cattle, or wherever the picanha was popularized. I know Brazil, if you go to a Brazilian steakhouse, oftentimes that cut of meat they're serving you as picanha. Long and the short of it is that is fantastic. I don't think I've ever had a picanha before. I've definitely not fixed one at home before. Threw it in the smoker with some hickory wood chips for a couple hours, and it was the best taste of meat I've had in a long time. I'm drooling just thinking about it. You leave that fat cap on there, and it just melts in your mouth. And there's no cutting the fat and giving it to the dog kind of thing. That fat just melts away in your mouth, and it's just amazing. What a great cut of meat. I'm gonna have to do that again real soon. Hopefully I'll find one again, or one of you can hook me up with a local rancher, because that would be even cooler. All right, and speaking of podcasts, etc., the FedWatch podcast on Friday floated the conspiracy theory that the whole time this whole FTX scam was nothing but an attack on Bitcoin, as involved as the government and the SEC seem to be in, Gary Gensler and the SEC had multiple meetings with SPF. Numerous politicians took millions of dollars in total from FTX, stolen money. There are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. There's some, Jeffrey Epstein related conspiracy theories. And I don't think it's anything more than the fact that he was throwing around a lot of money and getting exactly what he paid for. But nonetheless, it was interesting to hear them say that basically this is a setup from the get-go to just create a huge scam that basically poisoned Bitcoin, soured Bitcoin in the American populace and the American public's or the whole world's eyes, and that would help collapse and get rid of Bitcoin once and for all. I don't think that's the case. I think it was just an example of SBF got exactly what he had set out to get in the beginning when he was throwing all that money around. And money buys you access in Washington, D.C., and I'm sure in pretty much every capital around the world, right? And speaking of podcasts, if I have to hear Tulip Mania brought up once again, I may legitimately throw up on air. 4 years ago, when you'd hear Tulip Mania brought up, you knew immediately that you had wandered across somebody who had just heard about it for the first time, a no coin or a Bitcoin hater, and they thought they'd come up with a clever new thing to throw in your face whenever you mention Bitcoin to them. Of course, if you know anything about the Tulip Mania, in fact, there's been a lot about the Tulip Mania that's written that basically the Tulip Mania, while tulip bulbs were in fact traded for thousands of dollars or whatever at the time, the whole myth that everybody was mortgaging their houses and that all these people lost their homes and their businesses because of Tulip Mania was basically just a myth. It's legend. It didn't happen. There were speculators that got wrecked on tulips, but they kind of were just like speculators in general. And for the most part, they got wrecked like speculators get wrecked. So, but just anytime you hear Tulip Mania, it's kind of like when someone when an atheist is talking to a Christian and they learn some quote about the Bible that they think they're just so freaking clever because they can throw it in their face and it's the only thing they know. It's like, ha, I got you. Jesus said the following and therefore you're wrong. And that's just completely taken out of context. And you're like, oh my God, not this again. Not the Tulip Mania again. And of course, even more disappointing, and I'm not going to call the host out, but the best defense the host gave to counter his guest bringing up the Tulip Mania was saying, well, it's not like the Tulip Mania because the Tulip Mania only happened once. And while that is a solid defense, because usually when bubbles don't reinflate, right? You have a big bubble and it pops, and then that's it. Although the housing bubble's reinflating, right? But it took a decade, and it's not the same thing. It's a similar set of circumstances. History may be repeating itself, but it's not the same bubble. And so the fact that Bitcoin crashes in 4-year cycles, it pumps and crashes and pumps and crashes. Obviously, that means that's not indicative of a typical bubble. But in general, the best defense of the Tulip Mania is, dude, you're a freaking idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you think you're clever because you read about the Tulip Mania and you've got this new sword you think you want to wield to your new orange, pilled Bitcoiner friends, but it's fake news, man. It didn't happen. It didn't happen like you think it happened. Do a little bit more research instead of the New Yorker article or whatever you read. All right, and it looks like Augustin Carson's had his ladies and gentlemen, we got a moment, his mission accomplished moment, his read my lips moment, declaring victory last week, shortly after last podcast, I guess. It's been a few days now. As you know, Augustin Carson, who is literally the most, if you visualize a cartoon fat cat banker villain, he literally is the most analogous. He's the human being on the planet who looks the most like you'd envision. I mean, literally, if you looked up stereotypical bad guy, banker villain, you would see a picture of Augustin Carson's under that entry. Of course, he's the leader of the Bank of International Settlements, the former Nazi bank that sold and helped the Germans launder all the gold they stole from the Jewish people in their concentration camps. But that aside, the history, the legitimacy, and the just plain evil of the Bank of International Settlements, and completely aside, he is just flat out wrong when he said that crypto has failed, that technology will never beat fiat, basically. And a lot of people are pointing out, well, maybe he's right. Crypto has failed. Hopefully crypto's failed, right? Bitcoin, not crypto, that we'd be perfectly fine if crypto failed. That's not what he meant, obviously, because, people like to lump Bitcoin and crypto together, but anytime they're slinging FUD, they're gunning for Bitcoin. They're not gunning for S coins. So when he says crypto, he means he's dogging on Bitcoin. And clearly Bitcoin hasn't failed, because I don't know if he checked, but it's almost $24,000 a coin right now. Bitcoin is bigger and stronger than ever. Just like every other bear market, great things have been built during the lull. It seems like there's too much distraction during an epic parabolic bull run for a whole lot to get done in the ecosystem. All the people that are running platforms and exchanges spend all their time onboarding new customers. All the real innovation happens in the quiet of the bear market, the quiet of the Bitcoin winter. And we've certainly had our fair share of developments during the good and the bad during this previous bear market. So that's amusing. And I think every podcast, every influencer, every Twitter account out there has lampooned Augustin Carstens for that. But, give me a break, right? And speaking of Twitter, Plan B teased $10 million Bitcoin with a tweet yesterday saying, although I enjoyed Bitcoin adoption the last 10 plus years, especially the investment returns, I am really looking forward to the vertical part of the S curve in the next halving period, 2024 to 2028. And he has an accompanying chart overlaying basically stock to flow and the adoption S curve with Bitcoin's price. And if you follow the dots, in 2028, Bitcoin's at a $10 million per coin mark. So while he flat out didn't say 2028 it'll be $10 million Bitcoin, I don't think you'd call that a full out prediction. You read between the lines, and he's calling for $10 million Bitcoin in 2028. And stranger things had happened, right? Because 10 years ago, $10,000 Bitcoin would have been a pipe dream. $1,000 Bitcoin would have been a pipe dream. I remember, and I was one of those people that had multiple touch points with Bitcoin, and I was not this early of an adopter, but I was following Bitcoin. And I remember a friend of mine who was a hacker type, old school hacker. He's Generation X. He was a hacker in the 80s and 90s, when you had to dial up your modem, you dial up your rotary phone and put it on the modem cradle. And, if you're lucky, you had a 300 baud modem, but I digress. Anyway, we were sitting there in his office one day discussing that Bitcoin had hit $1 parity. And I thought, that's a pretty big deal. And I thought Bitcoin was cool. And I didn't give it any thought that one day it might be worth a ton of money because it would become the new global reserve currency, or there would be hyper Bitcoinization. I just liked the fact that it was FU money, basically, that it was, I liked the anarchist aspect of it, the cypherpunk aspect of it, the money that the government can't seize from you. At the time, it was thought to be private, Bitcoin isn't really anonymous money. It's pseudonymous money. But back in the day, people basically considered it the same thing. That's why people were doing all kinds of crazy things on the Silk Road with their Bitcoin, et cetera, because they figured it was completely anonymous. And that's what attracted me to it. If I would have clued into the fact that Bitcoin was going to be the global reserve currency one day, and therefore, just because of the whole supply and demand thing, there's only something in the effect of 250,000 Satoshis per person. If the whole world is using Bitcoin, that in of itself would necessitate, extremely high valuation per individual coin, I would have invested, and I didn't. So we all have those shoulda, coulda, woulda moments. That was mine. So back in the day, $24,000 Bitcoin was probably harder to believe than $10 million Bitcoin would be today. I mean, Bitcoin only has to 4x to be 100,000, right? So 40x, basically just a little over 20x. It's not even a little less than 20x. Its previous all-time high of 69,000 to hit a million. And then once you're at a million, 10 million is only a 10x from there, right? So 2 cycles, a couple of 20x cycles, that's nothing for Bitcoin. You know, do I have a crystal ball to say that's going to happen? No, I don't. But I can see how it could. If Bitcoin does what I believe it's going to do, if you believe in Bitcoin, if you believe that the more and more people will continue to adopt Bitcoin, that it'll help the unbanked or bank the unbanked, to help the underprivileged all over the world, then you should be able to see how Bitcoin will hit $1 million to $10 million a coin easily. Whether it does it by 2028, who knows? But according to this S-curve adoption chart tweeted out by Plan B just yesterday, he thinks it'll happen as soon as 2028. And again, speaking of Twitter, Adam Meister at TechBalt has dropped a new One Bitcoin show just about an hour ago. I haven't actually watched it because I was prepping for this show. I'll be watching it as soon as I'm done here. As you know, if you don't know, Adam Meister TechBalt is an OG. He was doing a One Bitcoin show every day and then a This Week in Bitcoin show every Friday for years. And then he stepped back from that maybe a year or so ago, and then was doing them less frequently. And he got to the point basically where he wasn't going to do any regular shows unless people were paying him. His logic being that people that hadn't done anything for the Bitcoin space, hadn't onboarded or orange-pilled people, hadn't made millionaires by telling people to buy Bitcoin, you know, when Bitcoin was $1 or $5 or whatever, that they're making money hand over fist. He's been doing this for free, so you have to pay him to do his podcast. And he basically wanted to crowdsource $100 per episode, and $100 per week really isn't that much. But, you know, people lose interest, and it's hard to get people to part with their coins, their money, or their Bitcoin. So he's been off the air frequently as a result. And I don't know if someone paid him to do this One Bitcoin show, because previously he dropped one for free because he wanted to talk about ordinals. And this one, I believe he talks about that again as well. It just says in the promo for the show that he's going to discuss the Scott Adams noise, ordinals, Rachel Maddow, and democratization. And I actually have only heard the Scott Adams noise, and I've seen the memes, man. And I know that he's being canceled, basically. Scott Adams, that, you know, the cartoonist that draws the Dilbert cartoon, which has been going on for as long as I can remember. And it makes fun of like office culture. Before there was an office, there was Dilbert. And he tweeted something out, or he didn't tweet. He said something in response to people saying that it's not okay to be white, that got him into hot water. And I don't know. I'm not going to even quote what he said because I don't know exactly what he said. I haven't really delved into it. I just know he's being canceled. And apparently Adam Meister's going there. So if you want to learn more about that and you want to hear Adam's take on that, if you want to hear a solid Bitcoiner's take on the latest goings on this week, including the Scott Adams noise, as he calls it, and ordinals, make sure you check out Adam Meister's show. Again, he's at TechBalt on Twitter, like technology in Baltimore, where he's originally from, at TECHBLT. And I'll be watching that as soon as I wrap up this podcast. Okay, so why are we here? We are here because today is Wednesday, and it is DCA Wednesday. And you know, on DCA Wednesday, we dollar cost average. We purchase $20 of the Bitcoin. For those of you who don't know what dollar cost averaging, the official definition of dollar cost averaging, I believe, according to Investopedia, I don't remember where I got this, because I've been parroting this for almost 2 years now, and I don't remember exactly where it came from. But the long and the short of it is dollar cost averaging is an investment strategy where you invest your money in equal portions at regular intervals, regardless of price. For example, this is going to be our 84th stack. Again, we started almost 2 years ago, all the way back on Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. So far, we've stacked 83 times. Our equal portion is $20. So far, in less than 2 years, we've stacked $1,660 into Bitcoin. And that includes $37.35 of fees. That has gotten us a stack of 5,713,052 Satoshis. And we are a little bit underwater because our average purchase price is $29,056, our average cost basis. But as I mentioned a couple episodes ago, if you had YOLO'd in, if you had invested that $1,660 all at once, one lump sum on July 28th, you'd have more than a million sats fewer, less than a million sats. You'd have a million sats fewer. You'd have less than 6,700,000 sats for the same amount of money. So I think we've shown that in this particular case anyway, that dollar cost averaging beat lump sum investing. Most importantly, it's answered that question that I see all the time on Twitter and Reddit, and that is, I only have $50 to invest, or I only have $100 to invest. Is it too little? Am I too late? And if you think $100 is too little to make it worth your while to invest in Bitcoin, well, we've shown you can come up with 5.7 million sats at just $20 a whack, as long as you're consistent. As you know, we do our investing on Cash App on this show, and Cash App is not a sponsor. We do have a referral code in the show notes where you can get some, if you sign up using that referral code, you can get, I think it's $5 free for signing up. That may have changed. I believe it's $5. But more importantly, you get something for free for using that referral code as opposed to just signing up and getting nothing. And the podcast will get $5 as well too. So you can basically tip the podcast for free. You can actually get paid to tip the podcast by signing up for Cash App with that link if Cash App's available where you are. And again, Cash App isn't suitable for everybody because, there are trade-offs. So as with everything, do your own research and pick an exchange, a service, a method that's best for you, best for your needs, and choose that. We're going to use Cash App. And we're going to do something a little different today. So real quick, I'm going to add $20 to my Cash App because I don't keep any money on my Cash App. And that's one of the reasons I love it, is because I can add $20. I just did. And it's already immediately available to spend on Bitcoin, to convert to Bitcoin. And they'll let me withdraw to my hardware wallet immediately as well for free. That's something that a lot of exchanges won't do. They'll either charge you a mining fee to transfer your Bitcoin and or make you wait up to 5 days from when you purchased it to make sure your bank transaction settles, that they really have their US dollars before they'll give you your Bitcoin. Not the case with Cash App, at least not currently. So to purchase Bitcoin today, we're going to do something a little different. We're still going to tap the Bitcoin box, and then we're going to tap buy. But before we click on the $20 and the buy Bitcoin, we're going to change the order type from custom purchase order to auto invest. Now, if you've been following this podcast and you know me, you know I'm a glut for punishment. I like to stare at price charts, and I like to buy my Bitcoin live on the air every time. But Cash App will let you auto DCA. And the reason I'm setting this up is because I don't think I'm going to be able to do this on Wednesday, and I want to make sure that my DCA stack gets done. As I promise you, I'll make my DCA stack one way or another next Wednesday. So I'm clicking auto invest, and I'm going to click weekly. And that means it's going to purchase now when I hit buy, and then it's going to do so exactly 1 week from now and every week until I turn this off. So clicking done. Now I've got buy Bitcoin weekly. I'm going to tap 20, click next. And wow, it's taking a little bit of time. I got lousy 5G today. All right, there it is. So it says we're going to purchase $20. Our weekly purchase will be made at the same time every Wednesday. So right now we're purchasing $20, and that's going to get us, well, I got to click confirm. Why the 5G is horrible here right now. Probably because it's so hot. And boom, that purchased us another 82,517 sats. And if you'll pardon moi, just un momento, plug these numbers into if I can get my mouse to work, plug these numbers into my spreadsheet. Let's all go to the lobby. So we purchased it $23,692. 23. My mouse is freaking out on me. $23,692.19. So Bitcoin went up a little bit while I was yapping. That scored us 82,517 sats. How the sausage gets made, folks. How the sausage gets made. All right, and that lowered our average cost basis to $28,987.66. So under that $29,000 mark. And that's really cool because as long as Bitcoin stays below 28,987 now, we're going to continue to lower that average cost basis even lower. But perhaps more importantly, it didn't. My spreadsheet is just freaking out here, isn't it? Nope, it's not. Perhaps more importantly, our stack is now up to 5,795,569 Satoshis. And that is not too shabby. And so for those of you, again, that were thinking that just $20 a week isn't going to get you anywhere, one day 5.7 million, almost 5.8 million sats. When we were saying earlier that if everyone in the world were using Bitcoin, there's only 250,000 Bitcoin to be shared evenly around the world. And of course, Bitcoin won't be evenly distributed because nothing ever is. Real estate isn't, food isn't, money isn't, gold isn't, money never has been. There will always be some degree of inequality. Hopefully Bitcoin will help that a little bit, but nonetheless, if there's going to be inequality, if there's going to be inequity in the distribution of Bitcoin, you want to have that 5.7 million Satoshis and not that 250,000 Satoshis. All right. Well, like I said, I'm going to let this auto DCA run on autopilot. I'm going to let Cash App automatically invest for me next Wednesday. If, however, I have internet, I will jump on the air. I'll record a podcast before it does so and maybe switch it off and do a manual purchase. But bare minimum, one way or another, I'm going to stack next week. And then the Wednesday after that, hopefully we'll be back to normal. I'm not 100% certain how I'm going to handle next Wednesday yet, but there will be a show next week at some point in time, one way or another. Bare minimum, I'll have my auto stack and we'll talk about it just a couple of days late. In the meantime, we will see you perhaps next Wednesday and every Wednesday while I continue to explore our dollar cost averaging strategy. But until that time, keep on stacking those sats, you sexy sat stackers.